all of this here? This is a lot of information, and we have a lot going on everywhere. So why do we want to care? Why do we care about it here? And I want to underline that sort of like the process of assimilation that is happening out there, as in like Canada just ignoring sort of like hereditary law, going in with force, trying to destroy cultures, possibly even harm people. That happens across Turtle Island, so that also happens here. It just happens in more invisible ways. So think of what this land and this territory used to be, you know, even back when folks were doing wampum agreements and sitting down over feasts. And that's sort of like the direction that maybe the territory out there is headed. And while it's like easier to spot out there, it also happens here. And it's important to sort of like tie those struggles in. Like Band Council at Six Nations was instilled by the RCMP as well. So the things that enrage us about what happens out there, they also happen here. And it's important to care about what's going on here and relate it to struggles here and sort of like try aiming for some big things. Sorry, I'm getting nervous and I'm jumping ahead. So, the next point I kind of want to make is like settler responsibility. Jim kind of brought up being a settler. I talked a little bit more about being a settler. And we defined what a settler was. And I think that settlers are complicit in the ongoing colonization of Indigenous people of this lands, and in some ways responsible for the situation that's happening out west, that's happening here. And that's maybe like a hard grain of truth to swallow. We're like, you know, my ancestors settled generations ago, I have nothing to do with this. But we actually continue to benefit from the systems that our ancestors built, which continue to repress and oppress Indigenous people, people of color. Yeah. We also have, like, in a way, let the struggles out west get to where they are. So there was a crisis point last January, on January 7th, when the RCMP raided Get 'em Dane Camp. And in the last year, there have been actions, but nowhere near enough to build pressure to a scale where this project can stop. And so the consequences of that are what we're seeing today, where the Supreme Court of Canada is allowing decisions to be made on our behalf, saying that this pipeline is in the best interest of Canada, which is you, which is settlers, is us, sorry. We're not countering it in ways that can stop that progress, or we're not countering it yet in ways that can stop that progress. But we'll talk more about that. Yeah, if you're having trouble being like, I don't see how I benefit, I'm like poor, I face like a lot of barriers, we all do. It's also just that like your success today, any successes or small successes that you have been built kind of on the backs of other people in a lot of cases. We benefit from like natural resources and extraction, the violence towards the land that happens everywhere, whether it's here, Northern Ontario, or unceded territories in BC. We've benefited from our ancestors' violence towards Indigenous people, whether we want to recognize or embrace that or not, it's true. And we are like part of the history of colonization as well as like the ongoing legacies of colonization. Third reason to care. It's urgent, it's high stakes, there's real consequences to this. The real consequences of like losing this beautiful territory that there have been photos of on the screen, and you'll keep seeing photos of on the screen. The impact of allowing an Indigenous people who still have like fought so hard to reclaim and keep their hereditary leadership and systems going, that would be demolished, it would be disregarded by Canada if we do nothing about this. We would be letting that happen. We would be repeating colonization. And then, of course, the threat to life. If RCMP do end up raiding that checkpoint, there is a real threat to life. And then, of course, in terms of strategic position, we're really far away. It's easy to feel like disconnected from faraway struggles. But Ontario is like a really good strategic point where there's lots of people and a lot of potentiality for like big disruptive things that actually like start to put pressure in the right areas where maybe this project gets withdrawn. Maybe some force intervenes and is like, you know what, this is not really worth like 10% of the GDP. This is not worth sort of like large-scale dissent in like so-called Southern Ontario. And I would argue that's kind of the point that we want to be building towards.
Yeah. A quick question about last January. It seemed like people in Hamilton or Ontario were maybe more outraged than we are now this January. Mm-hmm. Is that because what they're doing is less severe this year than last year, or is it because people are not caring enough now?
I mean, I only have my opinion on that.
Yeah.
I think it felt really urgent last year. I think it was like not on a lot of people's radars, and then the RCMP, like militarized RCMP officers were like jumping over gates and harming people that we knew and doing just like this absolutely outrageous thing. So there was that sort of like point of urgency, and there was like a lot of actions that sort of like followed that and sort of tapered down through the summer. But as always, like actions sort of like based or seated in sort of like anger or like an urgent moment or crisis, like they just can't sustain. So they kind of like taper off and then come around again when it's a crisis, and the world is like demanding so much of our attentions that like we just get pulled in other directions. There was like pride stuff happening, and yeah, so that's what I peg it to.
But it's still as severe as last year.
It's more severe. So we had this like point of climax where the RCMP attacked this point, and then they were successful, and industry went in and has been like freely destroying the territory. And now we're in a more urgent situation where the RCMP are prepared and preparing to do that again at possibly like the loss of life. And you know, what is the likelihood that anyone is going to let people return to that territory? So I think that we're at a point now where it's not just, I think that this, and not to like be alarmist, but I think that this is, and I think the chiefs recognize this as like, this is it. This is the moment we have to stop this project, to stop these like harms, to stop this process. And you know, if we lose, it has like very large implications, not just for the Wet'suwet'en, but for lots of Indigenous nations.
And it's a permanent injunction now.
Yes.
Where before it was temporary.